Hey there, today I'm going to look at two knives that are fairly far apart in price but fairly similar in purpose. I'm going to be talking about the Gerber Strongarm, made by Gerber in America, and we're going to be talking about the Fallkniven S1. Both of these knives fulfill that role of general camp utility knife. They're both designed to be somewhat of a jack of all trades, so what I'm going to do today is see how this $80 Australian dollar knife compares to this $220 Australian knife. So let's get to it. Made in Japan, VG10, made in America, 420HC. Let's see if you get an extra $140 worth of value out of this one. What I'm intending on doing is attaching sort of nominal monetary values every time that the Fallkniven bests the Strongarm, and we'll see if we make it up to that magical 220 Australian dollars. It's not going to be scientific, but it's going to be a rough guess. So if the Fallkniven improves upon the Strongarm significantly, we'll in a certain field, we'll sort of have a look at that attribute and see how much extra cost it might reasonably add on. See if we can chase up and figure out if it is really worth spending a whole lot more on a knife that might very well do a very similar thing to this knife here. Stay tuned and thanks for watching. Like, share, subscribe. So Fallkniven, for your $220, send your knife that is made in Japan out of VG10 blade steel, clad in 420 stainless steel. That means it's a laminated steel blade, so it's ideally got a sharper cutting edge than normal, with the extra toughness that the harder, brittler steels generally don't afford you. The overall length of the knife is 9.7 inches or 247 millimeters. The blade length is 5.1 inches, 130 millimeters. The full tang protrudes from the end. The knife weighs 190 grams, knife only, and a 6.7 ounces for you imperial folk. The blade is hardened to 59 Rockwell, and it's a, in my option, the sheath is the Thermo Sheath. It's the one I prefer when I'm looking at Fallkniven knives. This will retail in Australia, as I said, for $220. It seems to be about $150 to $170 in America, depending on which sheath you want. The Gerber Strongarm, made in America by Gerber, retails American dollars for about $50 to $60. In Australia, you can get this for $80 before shipping. The blade is made of 420HC steel. The blade length is 4.8 inches, so that's 12.2 centimeters, slightly shorter than the Fallkniven S1, but not noticeably so. The handle is made of glass reinforced nylon with rubber overmold, and the overall length of the knife is 9.8 inches, so 24.8 centimeters or 248 millimeters. So the knife is pretty much the same size, you just get a slightly longer handle on the Strongarm, slightly longer blade on the Fallkniven. Very much not a considerable difference, and not really worth mentioning too much because the rolls of the knives still feel more or less the same. It's made in America. The overall weight of the knife and sheath is 10.9 ounces, 309 grams. And the knife weight on its own is 7.2 ounces, 204 grams. So a slightly heavier knife, but again, not noticeably so. The sheath package with the Gerber Strongarm is a multi-mount system. You can mount this a few different ways, which I'll show you as I talk about the sheath, and I'm probably showing up cards on the screen now with me wearing it and the Fallkniven in different styles. From the get-go, I must admit the Gerber sheath is better than the Fallkniven sheath, so the Fallkniven won't be claiming any cash bonuses on the sheath. The sheaths on both are fine. I just prefer Gerber's because the knife goes in either way. It's got the different variations of carry, so you can put it on your small of your back, you can hang it off your hip, you can molly it through vests, all that sort of stuff, whereas the Fallkniven is quite a simple. It is an effective sheath and it won't freeze shut, that's the point of it. It's the Thermo plastics, highly heat and cold resistant, and it has very few moving parts, so it's not going to shatter if it gets too frozen, and the knife sits in there a little bit looser than most, just so the knife doesn't freeze inside the sheath. But overall, I think Gerber has put a little bit more thought into this, this sheath option. If you like leather sheaths though, you don't get one for the Gerber, so you can get the S1 with a leather sheath. So let's talk attributes of the knife, the certain parts that make up a whole knife. So we're talking blade, we're talking handle, and we're talking sheath. And I'll go into each of them and just weigh up each knife versus the other one. So my tests on the blade, I just did a whole bunch of camp tasks that you do with a blade. I did things like preparing food, so I cut up some apples. Now both knives on the apples were unsurprisingly fairly clumsy. They're both thicker stock knives, as you can see here, and both of their grinds aren't designed for cutting food exceptionally well. I did notice the Fallkniven came with a slightly better edge, so that did assist with cutting the apple, but both knives did sort of granulate the apple towards the bottom of the cut, and that's to be expected. Out of the box, the Fallkniven was the sharper blade, but they both cut paper very well to begin with, sliding through with very little issues whatsoever. Neither knives had been used and were both on their factory edges when I started the test. I took the knives up against some wood. So the first thing I did was just a little bit of light chopping, and I found that the blade of the Fallkniven, because of its convex edge, just seems to cut a bit more like an axe, and kind of just, both when you're trying to say take a limb off a tree and you're doing a push cut, I did a push cut with the Fallkniven and it just seemed to go in deeper with each sort of stroke, and I needed to apply less pressure to the back of the spine to get it in there. The Gerber Strongarm still did just fine at the same task, but it just needed a little bit more rocking and pushing to get it in. I guess that's to do with the edge geometry. I guess you need to appreciate a saber grind like the Gerber has is a lot cheaper to do than a convex grind. It requires less careful machining. And that was probably a way that they save cost and price. The next thing I did was took some tree limbs that I did cut, so just some fresh branches, and just saw how each of them carved and cut and sort of just took material off that wood there. I noticed that the Fallkniven did do slightly better, and it just probably due to that sharper factory edge, as well as the convex grind, just seemed to dig in just a little bit easier and with a bit more effortlessly. And the Gerber Strongarm, of course, again, it was no slouch, but if I had to pick one, I would say that the Fallkniven probably does have a superior blade for doing your woodwork stuff, which is largely going to be what your camp tasks consist of. Because this is YouTube, I then did some rudimentary splitting. Both knives split just fine. They'll split wood, they're thick, they're strong knives, they're full tang knives. There's no issues there with either of them. I didn't really notice either one being better than the other one when I split a little bit of tree limb there. And following up just a final edge test, I cut what is really the enemy of most, especially lower grade knife stools. VG10 is a higher grade than the 420HC, but even for work against abrasive materials, VG10 will dull fairly quickly. So I took some manila rope, which knives hate, and I just cut, I think, about 5 or 6 times through that rope. The Fallkniven cut through the rope a lot easier, both just from rocking on a single point and then doing a full slice. That edge again, full convex edge, just seemed to bite a lot more severely through the rope and a lot quicker. The Gerber Strongarm did absolutely fine for its first 4 or 5, but then it did start to lose its edge. You must understand that manila rope is made of hundreds of fibres per strand of it, and it's each one of those little fibres is uneven and abrasive, and it's really hard on softer knife edges. And yeah, the Gerber did definitely feel that a little bit more. In fact, when I went back to do a paper cut test after the rope had been cut, the Gerber had lost a significant amount of its edge. The good thing about it though is this knife especially will be really easy to resharpen in the field and get that hair popping edge back on there. Just using a strop or a worst case scenario, the inside of your belt. Fallkniven also would be good for field resharpening because of that convex edge. It does really lend itself to just tying a belt up against a tree and stropping it back to fitness, as I'll demonstrate. Right now, in fact, you'll probably see me doing this exact thing. So both blades, good woods blades. I'd have to give the edge to the Fallkniven a little bit more, simply because it's got a grind that sort of lends itself a bit more to durability and woodworking type tasks, as well as just being slightly longer in terms of edge holding. It still is popping a really fine edge, whereas the Gerber is a little bit dull until I'll strop that edge back to life. So I suppose you look at value, and I'm going to add some implied value to these things. So say the Gerber, I reckon if Gerber could spend an extra sort of $50 per knife, they probably would be able to source a steel and a blade and put some more effort or time into the machining a convex grind. So perhaps an extra $50. So if the Gerber went from $80 to $130, I suspect they'd be able to probably match this blade quite well. So I'll give the Fallkniven sort of a notional sort of $50 pass on having a slightly better blade than the Gerber Strongarm. Let's talk about handles. Both knives have really good handles. They're both made of similar type materials, being sort of rubberized FRN type material. So they both have sort of a tackiness to them, but also a hardness to them as well. Both really happy with. I'm happy with both of these knife handles really. I like the enclosed tang. They are both obviously full tangs. You can see the tangs protruding from the back of the knives there. So being the Fallkniven there, and then the Gerber tang sort of sticks back a bit more of a glass breaker, cracker type thing, lending itself a bit more to being a soldier's knife, whereas the S1 might be lending itself to being more of a survival knife. But still, I categorise both of these as just general belt camp knives. The shaping on the Gerber is a little bit thinner towards the middle point here. When you grip, you do wrap your fingers around a little bit extra. Oh, squished mozzie. You do wrap your fingers around a little bit extra, and they sort of sink into this middle part here, making for a really sure grip, and I do really like that about the knife. The only problem with the Gerber is it does have this top grip here, which isn't really conductive to your woodworking tasks. You kind of end up having to lean over it a little bit. It can sort of dig into the back of your thumb. You can see I've got a little bit of a callus there from when I was doing my testing. It sort of does just dig in and wear away at your skin just a little bit. Both of the knives are grippy enough to be able to stab into wood and that sort of thing as well. I find just the forward grip on the Fallkniven, I find is enough to keep it from sliding forward too much when I'm doing light sort of stabbing or prying tasks. In hands, the Fallkniven, it's a bit more of a rectangular shape, but it does have a nice palm swell in the middle. It's a little bit bigger than the Fallkniven F1 handle, but not as big as the Fallkniven A1 handle, so just definitely that spec of the mid-sized belt knife, and it just handles really well. Nice and smooth along the back, but the checkered sides of it do keep your hand nice and stuck to the handle, and you can just slide your thumb forward, as it's quite intuitive, and yeah, no problems really at all. I would give the slight edge in handles to the Fallkniven purely because it is more suited for camp and woodcraft type tasks. The Gerber is still probably a better handle if you're going to be thinking of using this as a soldier, defense, combat type knife. I'm hesitant to give the Fallkniven too much of an extra dollar value, but I'd suggest that perhaps having a little bit of a flatter tang on the back there, as opposed to the spike on the Gerber, makes it probably a little bit better for being a camp knife. I'd probably say the materials cost about the same to make, so I'm not going to give the Fallkniven an extra, dollar. I'm not going to penalise it or, imply that this should be worth any extra money, really, because it's the same materials. It's just a different design choice. So the Gerber, really, an extra $50. We're still at $130 to get a Gerber as good as a Fallkniven. So the Fallkniven still is seeming a little bit overpriced. Let's talk about X factors, I guess. What does one knife do better than the other that isn't necessarily conductive to blade or handle or sheath? I think the Fallkniven's obviously got the better blade. The handle's about the same, they're just slightly different purposed. The sheaths, Gerber has the better sheath. It's just in terms of flexibility and in terms of quality as well, really. So the Fallkniven, really, it's $220. I would estimate it would probably add an extra $50 from Gerber's side to perhaps put a blade of the same quality as the S1 in terms of sourcing the slightly better steel and also convex grinding it at the factory. So really, what can we look at that makes the Fallkniven worth $220? I guess one main thing is brand prestige, and I know it's not really a quantifiable thing, but owning a Fallkniven and having, like I've got, I'm starting to accumulate a set of them, it's something that sort of brings you a bit of joy as well. So I guess there is a certain value in that too, that you might just enjoy collecting and using the knives. I mean, I've got a fair few fixed blade knives now, and I'll probably end up with a few more. I just like the selection and being able to choose which one I take out. That's probably not a factor for someone who's just looking to buy a camp knife, but it is some point of value that it's a sort of highly regarded brand, and I guess they've got the lifetime warranty as does Gerber as well, but it's definitely something that is kind of an X factor, I suppose, but certainly wouldn't be happy to to really say that that alone is worth the extra money to, you know, say if we're talking $130 to get the Gerber with the same features as this, still probably not really quite there. Another thing to look at is also the fit and finish and the general quality of the item when you first get it, and that is somewhere that the Fallkniven does sort of start to take back some ground. When you get the Gerber knife, there are certain things that just seem a little bit off on it. So you look, mainly I'm looking at this sharpening line here. So that is really thick behind the edge. In fact, the edge isn't really usable for the first inch. It's really, really fat, and that's actually not sharp at all. The edge isn't sharp until about there. That's when you'd be able to actually start cutting things with it. It's, you know, it's obviously just done on a belt in a factory, and it's just part of that cost-saving measure. They're not going to fit and finish it so intimately as Fallkniven does. Sorry, mosquito freak out. I've been eaten alive out here. So you look at the Fallkniven, and it does just come as much more of a refined package. You can see there the blade is sharp from this sharpening choil, which will also make it easier to sharpen. And there's no seams or anything like that on the handle. Really, it's all in really good sort of well done fit and finish. So there's sort of a bit of an X factor there as well. So overall, just for the first time buyer, if you are looking for your first camp knife, is it worth saving and saving and saving and spending a lot of money on the Fallkniven? Well, I'd probably suggest not. I would suggest starting with the Gerber Strongarm and seeing if that collector thing takes over, where you do sort of want to get a slightly more refined tool in the future. But really, for 90% of people, the Gerber Strongarm will do most of your tasks. There's two caveats though. One, you need to learn how to sharpen. So you will be sharpening this knife a little bit more often than the VG10, and you'll need to be sharpening it properly. The convex grind, the best thing about that is it's more forgiving to sharpen if you're not too familiar with sharpening. It's a bit like a Scandi grind. There's a way that a Scandi grind guides you really freely. The convex grind is the same in that you can just sort of freehand it and you can mess it up less. Whereas you will need to learn how to sharpen a little bit if you're starting on the Strongarm. The second caveat is that it's not quite as built for camp as the Fallkniven S1 is. Just a couple of things. The grip is definitely more combat focused with the spike pommel and also the double guard there, and it's got that grippiness to it. There's actually a little bit rough on the hands when you use it without gloves, but great again for you using sort of harder stabbing, door penetrating, lock busting type things that the knife is also very well suited for. So overall, I'm happy with both knives. You wouldn't regret either purchase, but if you're not really into camp knives and fixed blade knives, I wouldn't suggest going and just grabbing a Fallkniven as your first one. You'll really enjoy it if you do buy it, but the Gerber Strongarm will definitely do the things that you need it to do without any worries at all. Both are enjoyable knives to use and carry, and both are supported by Gerber USA is a good company. I'm not talking about all the stuff they make in China. They're a good company in Portland. Fallkniven is a great company, and they honour their broken products and all that sort of thing. Both knives I've tested before from Fallkniven. Both are nigh indestructible. They really are. The Fallkniven F1, which is a smaller knife than this, can take a lot of abuse, and the Gerber Strongarm, I remember hammering this into a tree a couple of years ago and standing on it, and it did just fine. So either are great choices. If you are slightly wealthier than most, then yeah, you might well just want to go straight to the Fallkniven and have a knife that will be pretty much perfect as your general camp tool. But if you're just starting out, or you're just not too bothered, go the Strongarm, forget the S1, forget the super expensive little fixed blades, and you'll do just fine as well. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you've enjoyed this little comparison. I'm going to get out of this mosquito-laden swamp marsh thing and get back home. See you all next time.